There we go. Okay, so there's a couple people really quickly I want to introduce. Normally Nella from OFLA is here to help me out, but I think she's on a well-deserved vacation. So Lucas, if Lucas is helping, I mean, I have various OFLA people helping out with the chat box. So Lucas, if you want to introduce yourself really quickly.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. I'm not as adept at helping run these meetings as Nayla and Terry. So thanks for your patience today, but I'm happy to help out. OFLA's really excited to get to participate and support this endeavor with ODE. A big thank you to Kathy and Ryan for all they do to support world language teachers in the state and really around the country, because we know ODE is a leader in terms of world language instruction. A little shout out to for OFLA, if we do rely on membership fees to support projects and to expand and to support teaching and learning next year. We ask that you might consider becoming a member, and I'm going to throw a little link for membership in the chat. So please consider joining us because it helps us support you guys.
Wonderful, great. And then I believe my colleague Ryan Wirtz is on. Ryan, you want to jump on real quick and say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone, and welcome to this session. I mentioned in the chat box that anytime that you have 110 and counting world language educators getting together in the middle of their summer vacations for PE, that's pretty incredible. So that truly is dedication, and we appreciate that. Your professionalism will carry you far as you prepare for the coming school year with all of the challenges that seemingly will be involved. So welcome.
Thanks. And Shauna, I see your post about the race and racism one. I'll add a link to our ODE page where the other ones are, but I know if you go to the main ODE page and in the search box, if you just type virtual, like virtual meetups, and if you scroll down, it should have it on the social studies page, but I'll put it in the ODE one also. Okay. So Lucas, we have, actually, if Lucas he's going to post the link in the chat box, and it's actually more than just a document today. I had so much stuff that I finally just created a folder in Google. So Lucas is going to go ahead and post that tiny URL code so you can just access. And when you get into the folder, the very first thing should say #1 handout, and that's what you want to pull up. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Hang on for a second. I got to get to that too so you can see it. Hang on a second. I've got a lot of things going on I have like so many windows open. I'm trying to keep straight of what I'm doing myself here. Okay. And I also have two cats in front of me that are fighting with each other as we're trying to do this. So I hope they don't knock my computer off. Okay, let me try this again here. Okay. So you should, when you click in the tiny URL, so it's tinyurl.com/July22nd-WLC. You should see this whole folder of a bunch of interpretive materials. So, and the very first one said #1 handout. That's what we're going to be using today for everything. And then the other stuff is resources I'm going to show you. So I'm going to share the screen with the handout, but if you'd also like to actually pull up your own version, go ahead. And then the handout has across the top the tiny URL also. Okay, so the first thing, so today's topic is, this week is about designing to the standard. So today's going to be interpretive mode and literacy. And then tomorrow, I got two great presenters, Beth and Carrie, tomorrow are going to do interpersonal and presentational, and they've got some dynamite stuff. So we're really trying to get into this sort of nitty gritty about things you can actually do once we get in the classroom. So the first thing we're going to do today is I always like to do just a little warm up. And I don't know if you've used Jamboard before. I just found this in a blog and I'm like, this is so cool. So I'm going to, if you want to, Jamboard is actually a part of Google. It's one of the things, if you go into the little waffle thing at the top and you click, you can find Jamboard, and it's a collaborative whiteboard. Now you're limited to 50 people per Jamboard. So what I want you to do is I have 3 different Jamboards made because I wasn't sure how many people would be here today. So just type in, open a browser and go up to your address board and just type in one of these tiny URLs. So if you type in one and it says you can't get in, it's closed, go to another one. But I don't think we have 150 people, so we should have everyone be able to get in there. And I'm going to pull one up myself. So yeah, it looks like some people are joining. So go ahead, and Jamboard, like I said, is so cool. Like you just, it's just in your little waffle of Google. So I just set these up really easily. And what I'm going to give you a quick overview of how Jamboard works. It's so simple. I mean, it takes like literally 2 minutes, but it's a great collaborative tool. And so I'm going to use it for our warm-up activity today. So when you're in the Jamboard, you can see at the top here, like it has the different screens. And basically every time you click the arrow, it just keeps adding a new screen and adding a new string. Someone's already in there doing it. So in order to write on the Jamboard, you've got 3 choices. You can either do the pen, and this could be with your cursor, or like if your students have a Chromebook with a touch screen, you can use touch screen. Yeah, like I see someone on there doing it. This is the eraser. Oh, one thing up here where it says clear frame, don't click that, because if you click that, everything disappears. So you don't want to do that on this one because you'll clear everyone. So you can either use a marker and use your finger. You can do a Post-it note, which is what I have up there. So if you click the little Post-it note, and you can choose your colors and everything, and you can do a Post-it note like someone's already done. And the other thing you can do is you can do an image, and you can search. So for example, like mine, I did a Google image search, and one of my favorite, we're putting up here, what's your favorite, a meal that has special meaning to you. So one that has special meaning to me is gnocchi. So I just went into the Google image, I find an image that I like, I click select, and then my image is in there, hopefully, and then I can make it different sizes. So that's what I want everyone today to do right now. This is just sort of our warm-up bell ringer to just pick what's a food that has special meaning to you. And you can either, oh, the other thing, let me show you, sorry. If you're running out of room on the front screen, just hit the arrow here at the top, and you can see there's one with notebook paper. And if you want to write on it, you can make it bigger so you could actually write on it. So there's all sorts of backgrounds. There's one with like these cute little dots. There's ones with graph paper. If you're a math teacher, there's blue, there's black, gray. So there's all sorts of slides. So if you're on a slide and you're like, this one's getting full, just go to a different slide, just hit the arrow at the top and just add a different slide. So let's just take about a minute to do that, and just put a food that has special meaning to you. So like I said, if the board is kind of getting full, just click on the arrow button at the top and go to a different frame.
Hey, Kathy, a question for
Yeah.
people that are having a hard time getting into the Jamboard.
Yeah.
Is that because there are already 50 people in one? Do
Yes,
they have to try a different link?
You're gonna have to try a different link. Yeah, you're limited to 50 people in a Jamboard.
Okay.
So if you can't get in the first one you try the other 2, and you should be able to get in one of those. And on a smartphone, you know, I don't know, I guess give it, I think you can use it on a smartphone. I would say try it on your phone and see what happens. The links, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back and show the links again for people who weren't looking. Sorry, there you go. So your links are either tinyurl.com, jam1, jam2, or jam4-WLC. It does link with Google Classroom. If you just go in and say, like literally Google, how does this fit with Google Classroom? You can go in and find it. What's really cool also is you can save the result as a PDF. So that's really cool, because you could save it if it was something that the kids were working on, or, you know, they could save it as a PDF and submit it to you as a PDF, or if it's something that you want to use in the future. So those of you who have just joined, if you look up on the screen, we're doing a Jamboard, which is one of the Google features. And Jamboards are a collaborative whiteboard. And so you have 3 different options there because they're limited to 50. So those of you who just joined, if you can't get in one, like Jam1, try Jam2 or Jam4, because they are limited. So we'll just do that for a minute, just a little warm up, get everybody going. All right, so we've got this one going here. Nobody's on the other pages yet, but that's okay. So we got some foods on here. Let's see what we got on number 2. We got some foods going on number 2. We got some foods going on number 3. Oh, we got tons of them on the third one. Yeah, so this is just a great feature. Like if you're looking for something on the first day of, you know, on the first day of school, especially if you're remote, because I know everybody's got different things. This might be a nice thing to do the first day of school, and it's a good way, or the first week of school, because like I said, you can save the Jamboards also, and then go back to it and use it later again. You can make a copy of it. You can save it as a PDF. But this might be a good thing to do on the first day of school, is just, especially if you have level 1 kids whom you've never met, maybe just say, hey, you guys, put up your favorite food. And then just start, you know, and have them put their name, you know, put your name and your favorite food, their first name and favorite food, and then just start doing some target language stuff with them. So I just think this would be, like I said, I just discovered this in a blog, and some of you are probably like, oh yeah, we totally knew about this, but I thought that would be a fun one. And so this would be great also because you could use it, you could pull it back up periodically and reuse it. But what I really liked is it's an easy way for kids to collaborate together. You can put 3 or 4 kids in a group if they're on a project or whatever. So just a great tool. I've tried all 3 and I can't figure out how to put anything in the Jamboard. Okay, Dan, over on the left side, if you look on the left side, you have either a pen that you click on, and you can either use your mouse or you can use your finger if you have a touchpad. If you scroll down a little bit and hover, you have a sticky note you can choose, and then you can also choose a Google image or upload. The last feature is this, it's like a laser. I'm not quite sure what it would be, I guess, to circle. So if you click on the laser, like you can circle and it sort of follows around like that. So I guess it's just sort of a cool feature. Okay, so I wanted to show you that tool, number 1, just to sort of get us, you know, what's your favorite, oh, I think I see Ryan's, tortilla española. Just something to sort of get us going here, a little bell ringer, but also a really cool tool that I think is going to be a great one for collaborating. You know, we've done Padlet, we've done Mentimeter, and I think I might almost like this Jamboard even better, maybe just because of the name, I don't know, but I think it's even easier to use. And it, like I said, there are, I wish Google would let you upload docs under the Jamboard. Yeah, that would be nice too. Okay, so I am going to go back to the handout. So if you have the handout pulled up, and Lucas Lucas, you may want to throw the link in there again. So as I mentioned earlier, to those of you who came in a little bit late, today I actually gave you an entire folder because I had so many materials that I wanted to give you that I ended up just putting them in a folder. Okay, so we're focused on interpretive mode and literacy. As always, I'd like to give you some references to refer to after this so you can go a little bit farther on your own or further, whatever. Okay, so there's a link to the standards because everything we're doing this week and always is based on the standards. This Appendix D gives different interpretive tasks for different levels. We're going to actually look at that. And there's an Appendix F that goes with it. That's from Actfl. And they were generously, that's actually from one of the books that they published, but they were generous enough to let us use it here at ODE and post it. Leslie Gran, if you haven't gone to her stuff, she's like just a guru. She has so much stuff. So check out her website. Ed Puzzle, I believe Maria and Kendra did that last week. So we had Ed Puzzle, how to do that last week. That's in one of the previous videos. There's a couple authentic resources lists. We have an ODE list that's listing by language, but we're also updating the model curriculum. So right now in progress is, right now it just lists the resources by different topics and themes, but we're also adding a section where we're gonna put, like, if you have novice learners use this, you could use it this way. And so we're adding that. An interpretive strategies list from ODE, same thing. It has some current things, but we're updating it right now. So that'll be done in 2021. And then the last link is the Remote Learning Resource Center, which is the same page where you've always gone for all the links. And we started that last spring. But as you scroll down there, you can see where we have resources that are listed specifically for remote education and texts that are scaffolded for different levels. And some of them that are really good, and they're not all authentic, but that's okay because they're still great for practicing literacy. Probably my favorite is the Mary Glasgow Plus. Newsela or Newsela, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, News and Slow, TV Sang for French. So if you're looking for resources and you're sort of like feeling overwhelmed, start with our Remote Learning Center because it gives a lot of resources that are already pulled out for you. Okay, quick overview, because as always, if you have been in the last few weeks, everything is based on universal design for learning, which is very simple. Basically, we come up with multiple ways to engage the students and motivate them, especially remote. It's going to be tougher. We give a lot of different ways to present the material, so they have some options and choices that fits best for them. And then we give them several ways to express what they want to do. So it's really a personalized path to learning, and it really is. It makes much more sense, and I think it's much more engaging for the students. I'm not going to go over all of this because this was the July 8th webinar and the handout and the notes. But basically, the fundamental principles are that we're basically making sort of a buffet. We come up with a variety of activities that we know will sort of hit the needs of our kids, because we know for the most part, I mean, there's always additional needs, but for the most part, most language learners have similar issues that they come in with, whether it's pronunciation or reading or whatever. So, and then the other thing to talk about is, remember, there's different types of activities and support tier 1 are activities that we do for everyone in the class. And so the more tier 1 activities, sort of like you know, when they design buildings, it's the same thing. The more tier 1 activities you do to meet sort of a variety of needs, the less you have to do the tier 2, which are ones where students really have that specific need. And then remember, tier 3, if it's really a need that's beyond what you can do as a teacher, don't feel like I've got to handle this myself. Go, you know, go with the IEP team, go with the title teacher, go with the administrator. So keep in mind that tier 1 and 2 is what we can really do in the class. Tier 3 is really when it gets out of sort of beyond what we can do. Okay, let's get into the good stuff here. All right, so first thing, in the chat box, you can see the first question on here. In the chat box, I want you to put, what does literacy look like in your classroom? And this is where Lucas has to start monitoring the whole chat box for me now. So what does literacy look like in your classroom? So go ahead and type that in the chat box. Bad, it looks kind of bad. It's funny. It's okay, we're an honest, safe place.
Hey, Kathy, while we're waiting,
Yeah.
Martha asked a question. She's trying to get a book for UDL guide. Do you know one that's really good, sort of a step-to-step guide sort of thing?
It's the one by Katie Novak. I think it's called UDL. It's in the, if you go to the July 8th one, it's on there, but I know it's by Katie Novak. I think it's called like UDL and U or something like that, but that's the best one. Very easy, very practical. But Katie Novak, N-O-V-A-K.
Okay. So what does literacy look like in your classroom? Kathy, would you like me to just kind of read some of these out or just look for questions?
Just look for questions. I have a separate computer with the chat box too. So it's just sort of everyone kind of getting in their brain, what does literacy look like? A lot of you have probably did this workshop with me live, so some of this might sound familiar. Because it's sort of our 7-hour workshop or 6-hour workshop that we're doing in 75 minutes, basically. Okay, good. So yeah, you can see all sorts of there, and I will save the chat box to make sure that afterwards I save it and then I post it. Actually, I just lost my chat box. Okay, I save the chat box so we can everyone can look at it afterwards too. Okay, so a lot of just a lot of visuals, a lot of authentic resources, things that are engaging, right? Similarities and differences, exactly. So lots involved in it. Okay, what we're going to do now, you take a look back at the screen, is we're going to do a literacy quiz. And I'm going to switch over to a PowerPoint here in a second. And normally what I do with this quiz when we're in person is you have to like stand up and sit down, which you're welcome to do if you want, but you can also just if you're like, I need some exercise, but you can also at your spot, just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So hang on for a second. I'm going to stop sharing and get to the quiz. I'll show you what I'm going to do here. It will not replay the chat box, so that's why I saved the chat and whoever just asked that, and I tidy it up and sort of get rid of all the, sort of organize it so it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, let me find, here's my literacy quiz. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is I'm going to show you different things, and what I want you to do is either a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a stand up or a sit down, whatever you want to do, and I want you to tell me how well you understand what appears on the screen. Okay, could you understand it? Could you explain it to somebody? Could you do it or whatever? Okay, so first question. I think let's get going here. There we go. Okay, H2O. This is science literacy. H2O. So thumbs up or thumbs down if you get it, or I guess a thumbs halfway. Okay, H2O. So just do this at your place. Okay, stochastic optimization on complex variables and pure state quantum tomography. Thumbs up or thumbs down that you know what that is. Oh, you don't have to show, you can just do it privately at home. You don't have to put it in the chat box, that's okay, sorry. Yeah, just to yourself, a thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, let's do some math literacy. 6 times 4 plus 12. So just to yourself, is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down that you could do that or read that? Okay, next one for math literacy. 1 ounce of solution X contains only ingredients A to B in a ratio of 2 to 3, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel about that one? All right, let's keep going. Some music literacy. So the music on the left, if you could read that and play it or sing it or whatever, thumbs up to yourself. All right, and the next one, sonata. What would you do with this? Can you read it or not? or do it or understand it. Okay, let's do some football literacy. So thumbs up or thumbs down for the picture on the left. Thumbs up or thumbs down for the picture on the right. Okay, education literacy. So read that and thumbs up or thumbs down. And then the one on the right, thumbs up or thumbs down. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is, hang on, I'm gonna stop sharing, is, and let me get my handout back. I continually lose it whenever I stop sharing. What I want you to do in the chat box now, hang on, I'm sorry. I gotta get back to the handout and go back to my screen share. Hang on a second. Oh, there it is. Okay, so what I want you to do now, look at number 3 on the screen. In the chat box, I want you to jot down, because these are all literacy and they were all like words and stuff or whatever we understood, I guess. In the chat box, I want you to jot down, why were you like thumbs up in some of the topics and then thumbs down in some of the other topics? What helped you either understand or what prevented you from being able to understand or be literate in the topics? So in the chat box, put what was going on. Why were you thumbs up for some and thumbs down for some? So we're seeing experience, level of complexity, background knowledge, interest, inexperience, familiarity, relate to my experience. Some words seemed esoteric. Good word. Familiarity, background knowledge, complexity, experience. Didn't understand the topics, unaware of the details. What was my knowledge base? Jargon specific, like you understood educational literacy both because we were very jargon heavy. Vocabulary, short statements, prior knowledge, interest, background. The visuals are easier to comprehend. Exactly. Okay, another question, and this one's not on the screen, but I'm just going to say it and ask you to type in the chat box. If you had to become proficient in one of the ones that you had like a thumbs down on, and someone's like, you got to be able to teach this or explain to somebody, what would you do to understand that concept? Like if you said the math one on the right, you couldn't do, or the science one, you didn't know what it was, but someone's like, you have to become literate in that. What would you do to increase your knowledge or your literacy in that topic? So read, research, look for sites online, watch videos, ask an expert, study, learn the subject, find an expert, read, research, read. Look for videos, talk to people, learn what the key terms mean, so the vocabulary, understand the jargon, more input before I can try and, yeah, before you can try and put it out there, you got to see it or hear it. Go to Michigan football game, haha, maybe an Ohio State game. Ask a friend to explain it to me using more simple language, break it up. Perfect, exactly. So those are all the things, I think it's sort of obvious where we're going with this. These are all the things that are happening in a classroom for literacy, okay? So if we want to take a look at the standards, yeah, tons of reading is ASL, interpreter, context, break it up. Yes, exactly. Okay, so what we're going to look at today when we look at all our interpretive activities is we're going to focus on the standards. So the 2020 standards, I'm just going to click the link. They're at the top of the handout when I gave you the references, they're in there also, but I'm just going to go ahead and pull those up so you can see them. When you get to the main standards page, well, I'll pull this up and you can see it. Here you go. We did a standards webinar back, I think, in June. So if you missed that one, you're welcome to go back and read it, or read the notes or watch the video. But basically, we have our different standards that are now by proficiency level. We're now world languages and cultures to try and really show people what we do. So what we're going to look at today is I'm just going to pull up the the interpretive standards really quickly for you to look at, so you can see where we're coming from. Just sort of scroll this, and this is the full grid of all the standards. You can pick by proficiency levels also, but it's easier if we look at this. Okay, so when we look at interpretive communication in the standards, you can see we have the different proficiency levels from novice low to advanced low. I don't need to read all this to you because we don't have time to go through every single one. And then the left-hand side are the functions within interpretive communication and culture. So we investigate in the product's practice perspectives, we compare behaviors, we comprehend authentic texts that are spoken, written, or signed. So when you see the word texts in the standards, it doesn't just mean written, it really means basically anything that kids read or view or hear. And then we also have literacy standards, which has been as a strand that was added more intentionally this year, because I think we think it's really going to be helpful to help teachers, help kids access resources, whether they're teacher created or textbook or authentic, but to really help them access those. And so if you look on the left-hand side, the literacy standards include, and the same thing, they go all the way across, but it includes infer meaning and nuances, like with cognates. What are the organizational features of the text? What are self-questioning skills? Make text connections, select and use and cite resources. So like I said, I'm not going to go over all of these because that would take the whole session. But those are the two things we're going to focus on today. These features of how do we build literacy skills, and then what exactly are interpretive tasks. All right, so I'm going to go back to my and Lucas, if there's questions, just let me know.
We're good right now. I don't see any.
Okay, Martha, you may want to mute yourself. It looks like you came unmuted.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so basically I have it summed up for you on the page here. So the interpretive, those are the three things. And again, authentic texts that are spoken, written, or signed. So text means anything. And then the literacy are those 5 main functions. Okay, so that's sort of the background of everything we're doing today. When you're making interpretive tasks, if you're ever stuck on like, wait, what am I supposed to do? Or what literacy skills do I need? The standards are very straightforward on how, like, if I have novice low kids, how do I help them understand a text? Just go right back into the literacy standards and take a look. And then we have all the progress indicators that are examples. So the standards really are just like the can-do statements. They're very, very straightforward. Now I want to do one FAQ really quickly here. In the beginning of the standards, we have an FAQ page with typical questions people ask. And one question that comes up over and over and over, and it's number 5, but I just copied it on here so you can see, is how do authentic materials, teacher created materials, and textbooks fit into the standards? So here's the whole answer, but I highlighted the key parts. Basically, the goal is we want to prep our kids for when they leave our classroom and go in real life. So we want to prep them to be able to access authentic materials, because that's what's going to happen when they leave our classroom. And if we don't do that in the classroom, we're really doing them an injustice and we're not preparing them to leave. But if you use textbooks or readers or teacher created materials or stories or whatever you use, those are fine. Those are great. Just use them as a scaffold. They're a bridge to getting to the authentic materials. A lot of times, like the textbooks and the readers and the stories and everything have great culture in them. They have great level appropriate activities, which are really good for building those literacy skills in a bit more familiar context. And then take the same thing and then go on YouTube or go on a website and try and find something authentic that covers the same cultural topic or the same type of thing. So there's nothing wrong with using textbooks, readers, other things that we create as teachers, as long as we are also using authentic materials at the same time. And that's even beginning at novice low. All the research when we were doing the can-do statements is, in order for the students to build their cultural competence, they have to be exposed to those authentic materials beginning at novice low. And that's what we're going to talk about today, like what would that look like. So don't throw away your textbook or readers or anything like that, but also don't throw away the authentic materials. There's room for both. So use the ones that are maybe a little bit easier to build, still look at the standards, still use those same literacy skills that are in the standards, and then transfer those over to authentic materials.
Hey, Kathy, a question for you real quick from Martha.
Mm-hmm.
She noted that there's a part for immersion in case 6. Can you explain, I think she wants to know.
And the standards.
How that connects here.
Yes, the K6, the difference in the K6, because proficiency is proficiency, so the proficiency levels aren't different. The two differences in the K6 is because we have the literacy standards now, literacy for K6 learners is much different than literacy for 7-12. So when you look at the K6 literacy standards, you'll see that it addresses students who don't know how to read yet, all the way up to kids who just cognitively are not as developed as a middle or high school. So the two differences you'll see in the K6 are the literacy standards are modified to be more appropriate for beginning and early readers. And also the culture contents are more leveled down to what would be appropriate for younger students. So those are the two differences. Proficiency doesn't change, but the literacy skills and the ability, the cultural topics and like the examples change. Thank you for that question. Yeah.
Yeah, another question. This one I think deals with sort of the pre-reading or pre-listening. So how do you provide students with a vocab list when preparing and getting kids ready to interact with authentic materials?
This is the question I always ask myself as a teacher is if the student were not in my classroom, what would they have to help them? Would they have a vocab list with an authentic material? If they're in Paris, there's no vocab list to go with it. So our goal is that how do we create activities that will help them discover and use the appropriate vocab in there? And we're going to talk about some ways to do that. That's a great question, but always sort of think about that. If I'm using authentic material, what is the actual way the student would be using this if they were not in the classroom? And I think a lot of times that can guide what we do. I'm not saying you can't ever do a vocab list. I don't know, maybe it would work. I don't want to say you can't ever do anything, but just sort of always think about, is there a way if I give them the vocab list, or would it be better if I do the authentic resource and let the kids create a vocab list from it versus me giving them the vocab list?
I don't know if we're at a time for a break already, but Susan Denies is ready to share something.
Okay, Susan, gotta go fast.
Hi, and just in terms of authentic materials, I have about 60 menus from different restaurants in Spanish-speaking countries. And so it starts so many themes. So they look at these menus when we talk about foods, but we also look at it when we talk about menu foods and weather. Do you sit outside? Do they have a patio? Then we go to the real website that they have. Then we reintroduce times. What time do they open? What time do they close? We use every kind of material, every single thing we can think of. They love them. And so it intrigues them, and then they want to know more. And so they go online and look at the real websites, and they can piece together more parts. That's all.
Right. That's a great thing to bring up, and we're going to look at that a little bit later, but it's always, that's a fantastic thing, is use one resource in as many possible ways as you can. I'm looking at Doreen, who says, you know the principles, but you want to know how to do it remotely. The one thing, and I'm sort of glad I'm doing an interpretive and not the ones tomorrow that Beth and Carrie are doing, is because to me, the interpretive is the easiest one to do remotely. Because if it's, and we had our discussion the other day about what about kids who don't have the video access. So that's a little bit different if you're trying to do a video, and we can, you can refer back to that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Interpretive is the easiest one to do remotely because you can give them the reading, whether it's a paper copy, whether it's online, you can give them the video, they can watch it over and over and over, or take their time reading it. Yeah, the interpersonal is definitely going to be the most challenging to read. Yeah, so the interpretive, and again, we all know the importance that a kid can't speak until they hear a bunch of, they have to hear before they can speak. They have to read a bunch before they can write. That's just, second language acquisition fundamentals. And so that's what's so nice about the interpretive piece, is that is the piece that kids don't need us to be with them while they're doing that. We'll provide them lessons, we'll work with them when we're face to face on, practicing with it. But this is the biggest piece that kids really can do independently. And it's often the hardest part, especially the listening piece, or for ASL, watching the videos. And so it's nice because now the kids can do it over and over and over versus one time in class with me, and now they fall behind and then they just totally give up. Shoot, I was just going to say something about that. I don't remember, but.
Kathy, a question for you that popped up to me privately.
Yeah.
A teacher's wondering how to stay in the target language 100% of the time, visually and orally, when working with pre-K through 5 students online.
Oh boy, that's a good one. I'm going to say that, the goal is always as much target language as we can. I think with the remote thing, as we've talked about before, with those beginning days especially, is we have to realize this is a special circumstance. And again, I think the most important thing we have to build when we have the kids come on is the social emotional learning and the safety piece, especially remotely, and that community piece, because we all know that language has raised this huge affective filter with the kids. But if you think about, for example, the thing we just did in the beginning with the Jamboard, and I'm not sure if you were on when we did the Jamboard, but for example, if you just, you put up there and just put, favorite food, even if it's in English, that's fine, especially if it's pre-K, well, they may not be able to read. So maybe you just tell them, put your favorite food, it's, 2 seconds or whatever. You can still have it in French or whatever on the Jamboard, or whatever you're using, Padlet, and have the kids write, if they can write, or have them put a picture up. This may be something that obviously when you're working with kindergartners and pre-K, the parents are going to have to be involved. So it may be something that you're working with the parents to help you with this. And so they can see, okay, the activity for the week, Monday is that every kid has to post a picture of their favorite food. So the kids post a picture of the food and then with their name, like we said, and maybe the parents help them. And then you start using the target language to say like, oh, Kayla loves spaghetti and Brian loves, whatever, I don't know, whatever, cookies or something like that. So we're using the target language in very simple vocabulary words, very simple expressions, but we're also building community because it has been personalized. Or have the kids, maybe it's they put up a picture of either a pet or a favorite stuffed animal. So that way everybody can get in there. So I think with those pre-K little kiddos, the ones who are really pre-literate, do a lot with pictures, do a lot of speaking, do as much as you can, but it is going to be a lot of the instructions and everything will be in English for the parents outside of class. So when the kids come to class, you can do as much as you can with the target language. I don't know if that helps or not. I hope so. And everyone else, especially if you're teaching the pre-K kiddos, because I have to admit the lowest I ever taught was 6th grade. So if you have some advice for the pre-K kiddos, go ahead and throw that in there too.
Thank you. Yeah, the person sent me a big thank you. So
okay,
thanks,
good.
Thanks,
good.
Kathy.
Okay, let's keep looking here at the screen. And like I said, I got so much stuff here today, so I'm just going to start throwing it at you, and then whatever I don't finish, you can read on your own. Now, the first thing, or a couple things I want to talk about before, and I believe me, I have tons of examples for you today too, so don't think it's just going to be Kathy talking with, jargon or whatever as you speak. So, but when you're making when you're choosing your authentic resources, and again, we're talking authentic today, but you can extrapolate this to other resources that you use, obviously. And when you're making the lessons and you're focusing on the literacy, there's some certain things we need to think about. So the first one is when you're choosing the resource is that you have to decide, is the goal for the students to understand and use the resource for its intended purpose, which means like, are they going to use it the same way a native speaker would use this? So for example, and I gave just a ton of examples of things that when we use this resource, the kids are going to use it for its purpose. If I show them a commercial or an ad, it's, do you want to buy this product? If I show them a weather report, it's because, hey, we're planning a picnic and what are you going to wear? So all sorts of things you can see in here, menus like Susan mentioned, Venn diagrams, voicemails. I mean, and this is all just right from our samples in the standards and the can-do statements, the progress indicators in both of those. So again, if you're choosing something that is going to be used for its intended purpose, then you want to choose something that's more or less at the level of the student because you want them to be able to use it in the way it should be used. Maybe a little I+1, but you don't want to choose something that's so complex. Like we don't want to give them a weather report that some guy sitting at a desk talking with no map or anything, because that's useless for a novice student. So if you want them to use the resource for its intended purpose, then make sure you pick something that's accessible to the students. The good thing about this, if you see my hint on here, is that these types of resources that they're looking at are exactly what could be used to launch an interpersonal conversation and also to create their own presentational. So like Susan said, we're looking at menus, we're going to talk about the menus, and then you're going to create a menu. So that's what's nice about, don't forget about how those resources are not just for interpretive, they launch everything. They launch the conversation, they launch what the kids do. So again, I'm a firm believer in when you find one thing that works, use it as many possible ways. You could use it for vocab, you could use it for grammar, you could use it for tenses, you could use it for culture, anything you can. Now, so for intermediate, who you want to use it for its intended purposes, I have a whole list there. I don't need to read those for you, but you can see like songs and biographies, exact same thing. Pick things that are more or less within their sort of zone of proximal development, I guess that's the term, sort of their I or I+1, where it's something that they're going to, for the most part, be able to access, that it's not going to be so far beyond them that they can't access it all. Now, if your goal is that you want to use resources to help them build comprehension and literacy skills, because we don't always want to give kids things that they can completely understand, because then there's no way to build their proficiency. The only way to build the proficiency and the literacy skills is to give them something that's harder than what they can do. So, and I think this is always this is one that I remember Dr. Frank Troyan talked about this, and I think I agree. Give them something that it's complex enough that they have to grapple with it, but it's not so complex that they're going to be completely frustrated and give up. So we don't want something that they can completely understand, and we don't want something that completely loses them, but we want something that they are going to have to grapple with. And then again, if you look at the standards and the literacy, the progress indicators, the standards, it shows how to build literacy skills in both to draw from and build literacy skills in both languages. So don't forget to access what they already have in English. And if they're lacking in English, a lot of times the target language builds those literacy skills in English too. So it's bi-directional. I'm looking at this question about what to do live and what to do, say, for the live session. This goes back, if you remember, we did a session, I don't remember anymore which one it was, where you really have to sit down and think, I'm limited probably on my live time. What are the must-dos? What cannot be sent out to be due to the side? Like watching a video, kids can do that on their own. Giving them the questions, they can start that on their own. When I bring them in live, then we're actually going to talk about it. We'll look at the questions together. We'll talk about where they're struggling. But when you're picking face-to-face, especially right now, because it's going to be so limited, if at all, or you're in a Zoom call, really you have to sit down and say, what can they do without me, and put everything they can do without you remote, and what do they really need me for, and do that face-to-face. Okay, so just some other things about when you're choosing. The other one, F, choose text or videos that can be broken into chunks and scaffolded. So if you're trying to build literacy, here's an example that we have in our can-dos about if you're just doing like something like from a story or literature, where you start with the title, and then you go to a few phrases, and then you go to the topic, and then you go to predictable actions, and then you go to like the beginning, middle, and end of a short story, because just because it comes first in the story doesn't necessarily mean it's the beginning. It could be the end of the story at the beginning. The sequence of events with a plot twist, or understand the moral. So this is another thing when you're trying to build the comprehension and literacy skills. Pick something that's, they have to grapple with, and pick something that you actually can break into chunks and scaffold over time. Okay, we'll keep going here. So that was when you're deciding what's the purpose of it. Number 3 is always a huge one that I get from teachers, and that's, and not just me, everybody, is should the comprehension questions and answers be in English or in the target language? And again, this gets down to what's the purpose of the task. If you're trying to check comprehension, especially at the lower levels, and they have to answer in the target language, or they have to read questions in the target language, are you checking their comprehension of the text, or are you checking whether they can understand the questions? So if you're thinking, if they have to answer in the target language or read the questions in the target language, and they might not understand or know how to do it, then don't do it in the target language. Because if the goal is to see, did they understand this blog post or infographic, and they don't understand it because they didn't understand your questions, then the task was a waste of time for everybody. If you're trying to check language production, then you're going to, like presentational, then you would have them do it, obviously produce it in the target language. But since we're focusing on interpretive, especially at the novice level, really think about, what do I want them to do? How are they actually going to show comprehension? Again, that gets to what's their language proficiency. Basically, B and C are what I said. The other thing to think about is if you are doing the target language, and once we moved in like level 3, 4, 5, it's easier to do comprehension in the target language. But again, we have to think about, kids are very savvy test takers, or, like, can we write the target language questions in a way that the kids can't just read the question, find the similar target language in the text, and just copy it without ever knowing what they're saying. So that's an art, because kids are so good at, like, okay, I see this question, I see this word, I see this word, and I'm going to put the answer, and they have no idea what they're even putting. So that's another thing to think about. When the kids are writing or answering in the target language, make sure that we're doing it in a way that they can't just copy from the text, which is things. So, and we're going to look at some questions to be able to do that. So if you just say, like, how old is the boy? And they're like, oh, here's the boy, so I'm going to put that. That's really not like even a a big question. But if you're going to put stuff like, how do you know, like, what's the emotions of the boy? And so now they have to sort of read into it and say, oh, I see the word happy, or I see this and stuff. So things where it's not just asking those facts, but things that make the kids think a little bit deeper. And we're going to look at some examples of that.
Hey, Kathy, a question from Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
She's asking at what point we should expect complete sentences.
Yeah, if you go back, Ruby, and look at the standards, and this would be under the presentational and interpersonal, so that will be the next 2 days. But basically, novice low is practice words and phrases. Novice mid is a mixture of words, phrases, and simple sentences. So complete sentence can be, 2 words or 3 words. So your novice low is usually words and memorized phrases. Novice mid is words, phrases, and simple sentences, but still practiced. And then novice high is where they actually begin to create with language, if that's helpful. Right, and then exactly, yeah. So kids can memorize because they use complete sentences from the first day. If they just learn how to say, my name is such and such, that's a complete sentence, and they can speak it because it's practice language. Great question. All right, number 4, online versus offline, interpretive. We had our sessions July 14th and 16th with tons of ideas, so you can refer to that, and we're gonna look at some a little bit further on too. Number 5 refers to what Susan had said earlier. Stretch that resource, man. Be creative and use that one resource in as many ways as possible. That's probably the biggest piece of advice, especially this coming up year when it's just going to be, we don't know what it's going to be this year. So if you've got a resource for your higher level kids, see if you can find smaller or larger sections of the video or of the text or whatever to use with different levels. Use a video, like if you have a video, can you find a transcript for it also? Or if you do a song, can you also do the lyrics and do both reading and listening? And then use that to launch a speaking, a signing, a writing, a presentational task. Use it to find the vocab, to contextualize the grammar, to get the culture knowledge, to do reflection. So if you've got a resource or a website that's good, be like, oh my gosh, what can I do with, I chose this for level 3, but I could totally do this with level 1, 2, and 4. My biggest piece of advice to you with authentic resource is to use that in as many possible ways as you can. Okay, number 6, we're actually going to look at here really quickly. And that's, again, when we're doing comprehension, we want to make sure we're not just doing like a fact-finding mission, like how old is the boy, or what color is his shirt, or whatever. If you're asking a question, there needs to be a reason behind it. So I'm going to pull up this Actfl Appendix D, and it is in the references that I put in the beginning also. And this is just one of the best resources out there. Those of you who have been to my workshops live, you know this is probably one of my favorite. Ooh, I love that, what Marianne just put in the chat box. That's great. So Appendix D this is a really nice tool from Actfl. It has 9 different activities. And what's really nice is you don't have to do them all. You just pick the ones that apply. So it's anything from keywords, where you have the kids look for keywords in the target language. You have them give the main idea or the main purpose. You write some details either in English or the target language, and you say, here's 8 details, 5 are mentioned, 3 are not. Which ones are mentioned, and tell me how, and we're going to look at some examples of that, how you know.
Hey, real quick, regarding supporting details, there was a question that popped up a minute ago, and I think it ties in well here. So can you ask a question in English and then have them provide the answer with the section from the reading? Yeah,
and that's a great way to do this one, whoever asked that, because especially with the reading, because like on this example on this one, I'm writing 8 details, whether they're in English or whatever, or if I summarize them in French, I don't want to use direct from the text. And so I tell the kids 5 of these are actually mentioned. Go in the paragraph, and where you see A, put an A next to that in the text where it's mentioned, or write the sentence from the text that verifies it. So yes, that's an easy way to do it, where you're not giving them, like, it's not like here's the sentence from the text and find the same sentence. It's like, how do you know how do you know how the size of the boy's family, or how do you know if the boy has a big the detail may be this, the boy has a big family, and the student's like, yes, here it's mentioned because he says he has 8 brothers and 4 sisters, or something like that. So yes, that's a great way to do it. Okay, organizational features. So now you can see we're actually getting into some literacy skills. How is it organized? And this is why I love this template so much from Actfl, because it gives you examples. Is it a biography? Is it a description? Is it problem solution? You give them you can give them multiple choice. They choose which one, but they have to give you justification. I know it's an autobiography because I saw the word je or yo or ich or whatever throughout the text. Context, we all know this one. Give them some main phrases or important expressions in the target language and have them figure out what they mean in English. Inferences, I really like this section because Actfl gives ways for advanced, with a little bit more inferences, but also gives novice where it says, here's a statement, tell me if it's true or false, and tell me how you know from the text. Okay, so do you think this boy, the boy's talking about all his summer plans, and so you say, do you think this boy would be interested in going to a sports camp for the summer? And the kids have to find a reason in there to tell you, yes, I think he would because he talks about all the sports he likes, or no, this would be false because he talks about how he loves cooking and hates football or something like that. I don't know. Author's perspective. So what's the point of the view of the author? And again, give them some samples. Is he trying to be funny or historical or factual? They have to justify from the text. This is completely in line with our ELA standards. Our ELA consultant looked at this with me and she's like, oh my gosh, this is just perfect. It totally matches what's happening in ELA. Cultural comparisons. And these are, again, with Actfl, the intent of this template is to be done in English if that's appropriate for your level students. You may be able to do it in the target language, not a problem, but as we mentioned earlier, determine if you're really trying to get comprehension, can the kids do it in the target language, or do they have to answer in English? And there's no right or wrong answer, it's just what's appropriate. But again, cultural comparisons about how are these similar or different from both cultures and different perspectives. And then number 9 on here is just a personal reaction. And this one is actually done in the target language, but it's not graded, where you just have the students give their reaction to the text. And so if all they have, if it's a novice low or novice mid, and they can just get out things like, I like it, interesting, funny, or boring, or didn't like, or, no, pas du tout, or, whatever they want to put. So, because we're not grading it, so we're just telling them, give me a reaction in your best target language, and that's really sort of like a segue into doing more like interpersonal and presentational. All right, so I'm going to cut that off, and Lucas, jump in if there's any questions.
Nope, we're good right now.
Okay, and so Appendix F, I'm not going to pull it up, but Appendix F is the rubric from Actfl that goes with it. The best thing about Appendix D and F is you can use it with every single level learners. You have one template of ideas, and you can use it from novice low to advanced mid or native speakers or whatever. And the same as the rubric, which again, one of the great things about Interpretive is you, just like the resource, there's a lot of different things you can do for every level. You don't necessarily have to make it specific to one level when you're grading it or when you're making the rubric. All right, let's do some samples. Let's get into some nitty gritty. So I just kind of went like crazy thinking of examples of, and I thought, I've told you I taught French for 25 years. And then I also teach ESL right now at Columbus State Community College. So it's both, and teaching ESL is basically, I just teach French, except I teach it in English, really. And so what I did on here is I just started sort of brainstorming some examples. And again, feel free to, jump into the chat box and throw your own in. But so let's take a novice who's like in flex or elementary. Some of you mentioned like the pre-K kiddos or the first and second grade. So I just threw a resource in there and gave some ways that you could support comprehension, culture, and literacy. And I'm not going to read everything because that would take me an hour because there's so much. But say you just show a video of a fairy tale in the target language. And so you just do some pre-things. What do you already know? Talk about, is the character nice or friendly or mean? How do you know? What are the names of the main characters? Think about novices, especially novice low. They can understand words, maybe repeated phrases if it's said over and over. So if you look at the examples in there, it's not just about those details, that fact-finding mission, because that really sets kids up in a bad position. If you say, how much did the, loaf of bread cost that he bought, and they only say it once and the kid didn't get it, the kid, number one, now can't answer that. And number two, you know how it is, their whole panic level shoots up because they're like, oh my gosh, now I missed this question, and they completely shut down for the rest of it. So the goal is, when we're asking for comprehension, is we don't want to tell them what they need to know. We want them to show us what they understand. And so by doing more open-ended questions, like pick a character and do you think he's nice? Or like this one, especially with videos, how does the music help you know what's happening? How does the narrator's voice help you know what's happening? What do you think might happen? What's your reaction to seeing this in another language? So these are all sorts of things that are not just information about details, but about building skills about what do I pick up from the visual clues or the background settings or my personal reactions to it, etc. Okay, so a lot of questions in there. Now the slow, now I'm sort of going more into the like 7, 12, et cetera. Not that these couldn't go for the little kiddos too, if they can read. But again, novice low, let's take some target language headlines and headings from current events. And so we're just taking the headings and the headlines and the headings. That's it in an article. and about the USA and the target culture, because the culture, if you recall from the standards, is always about comparing my culture to the target culture. It's not just about France or China or Japan or whatever. It's about both cultures. So again, we use those literacy skills that are in the standards, cognates, highlight words. What do you notice about the punctuation and capitalization? Make them give justification. Like, is this positive or negative? Is this recent or historical? Make them tell you how they know. What do you think ahead of time? What do you think the purpose of the article is? Because if they're like, oh, this is a headline, or oh, I can see this as a pros and cons, immediately that's going to increase their comprehension. Either give them some additional headlines or have the kids pick it, depending on what level they are, and have them figure out which headlines are the same topic. So maybe this time you don't help them. And okay, so we did this one that was all about, I don't know, let's say COVID-19 or something like that. And so then you give them a bunch of other articles or headlines and say, okay, from this list of 8 headlines, which ones also talk about COVID-19? Okay, so just for them to transfer the skills they used. And always get in there, and it depends again on the age of the kids and their cognitive, but how would this headline be different if it were written from an American point of view? Okay, so obviously there's lots of headlines around the world right now about America. Take a headline, and again, depends on the age and the cognitive ability of the kids. But if America wrote this headline, what would it sound like?
Hey, Kathy, a question
Yeah.
regarding fairness to ELL students who may not automatically know American typical culture. How do we deal with that equity issue here in terms of cultural comparisons?
We always go back to, remember, when we do talk about culture, we always start with what do you know about your own culture? And that's not as obvious in this one. We talked about that in some other ones, but it always starts with, if I know this is going to be about sports, then the first thing we do is we have the kids start sharing, whether it's on a Mentimeter or on the Padlet or whatever, wherever you're doing it on a Jamboard. What do you already know about typical culture? And we do some sharing there to build that background knowledge. It's okay what they don't know, because they do know it in their own culture. So it doesn't mean it. So again, it can be USA, but you can also relate it to their culture. Teaching ESL like I mentioned in Columbus State, is I usually have about anywhere 15 to 20 kids in the class, and we usually have about 10 to 15 different countries. So they always tie it back to what they already know. Some of it they know about the USA, some of it is their own target culture. So it's really whatever they can draw from, and it might be a little bit, it might be a lot. The other thing to remember is when we are teaching culture and doing these resources, not only are we drawing on their background knowledge, we are also building their background knowledge. So maybe they don't know a whole lot about this topic right now about the USA because maybe they just arrived or whatever, but also after this unit or this lesson, they're going to know more about this topic. And so think of it that way. We're drawing on their current background knowledge, but we are also building their background knowledge as we go. So every kid's at a different place, and that's okay. So and this is where we get into that UDL. If it's a student who, they just arrived and they don't know anything about the USA, maybe you have options of the questions and you say, choose 6 questions of the 10. And that way the student has the ability to be like, I can't even answer this question. They don't have to. Hope that helps. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so that was novice low. Novice mid, let's go into, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pick both like video type and reading type. So that was a reading one. Here's a video one. Let's get movie trailers for American movies and target culture movies. And you could also use posters if you want to do readings. Okay, so again, always use Appendix D in the standards. But again, we get back to that prior knowledge. What do you already know? One of my favorite activities to do with students when we were watching a video is this right here. Have the students watch if we're doing movie trailers, with no sound, and have them predict what they might say. And that might have to be in English, depending on their level, or if it's older, they may be able to say it in the target language. It really depends where your kids are. Or do the vice versa. Listen to the movie trailer and predict what they're going to see. That's a great activity to do ahead of time to get the kids' brains already into that thing about, okay, what am I probably going to hear? You've already got that going. Okay, so then a bunch of different ideas about comparing. Does the difference in the title change the tone? What does this say about cultures? What do you understand? What are phrases you hear repeated? Why are they repeated? Again, whenever we're doing something that's a video, how do the music or the visuals or the way they talk or their gestures or their expressions help you understand the message? And, would you go to see this movie? I mean, that's really the point of watching it, is are you going to go see it? And then other things that you can do to extend it. Find a movie trailer for a film they like, do the same activities, have the kids find movie trailers, and instead of the teacher having to do it, let the kids find the movie trailers and post them for their classmates and wherever you Google Stream or wherever you guys post it, and they can do the same activities. So again, what we're trying to do is when we're building our independent learners, we sort of show them and take them through the process, and then we really try to extend it where now they take it on themselves and they become the teacher for themselves and for other students. Okay.
Kathy, a question regarding these strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Kayla says that these look more fun. Maybe I think that she's talking that maybe just
than the other one.
The novice low. She's wondering what might what might that look like for novice low? How could you take some of these more interactive and quote unquote fun strategies and activities and adapt those to a lower proficiency level?
Yeah, and you know, Kayla, that's exactly why I chose current events for novice low, because people like, I can't do current events with novice low, it's too hard, and that's exactly why I chose that for novice low. So if you're wondering, like, that's not even any fun, that's why. Look at what a novice low can do. Go back to the standards and look at what novice low, they can understand repeated phrases and words, practice language. Go back and look at the standards for what does a novice low proficiency look like, what can they understand in the standards, and then that's exactly what you do. Because they can still watch a movie trailer and they could still, or maybe a poster, whichever one's more appropriate, and they can still pick out a lot of cognates. They can pick out how the music helps you understand it. They can pick out, oh, they keep saying this phrase, you know, and again, if they're at home, you could tell them, you got to watch this, you know, 3 or 4 times, or however many times, you know, what are things that are repeated. So go back to the proficiency standards and always look at what's the interpretive standard for that proficiency level, and design your activities on that. Because what you'll find is kids may be able to, especially if they have high interest, like you said, this looks much more fun than the current events, is you may find that their proficiency goes up because their interest level has gone up. Hope that helps. Okay. Okay, let's go into novice high. So now what I did for novice high is I took that current events that we did back with novice low with the headlines and stuff, and I bumped it up for novice high. So the same type of things, you know, you could maybe do the same novice low, do the appendix D, do the standards, et cetera, et cetera. But then I just gave some harder activities, okay? And this is really based on the appendix D, the details. You know, here's a category, find, you know, say you're showing a video about a fashion show or something like that. And so they have to write down everything they understand in the target language that's related to fashion, or you're doing something where they mention countries. And so write down every country that you hear in the target language, or if they're reading it. Again, we go with the organization, give some key phrases in the target language, have the students guess the meaning in English, etc. So it's similar to what they were doing with the headlines, but kids can understand more at novice high. So we're trying to actually get some information, some facts out of that. All right, now intermediate low gets the fun one again. So now we go back up to those movie trailers, and let's see what we could do with that for intermediate low. And so again, we can do the posters or the movie trailers. And what would be also cool to do, and you could do this at novice low too, or any level that you're doing this, is get movie trailers from different cultures. Like, what does the French movie trailer look like versus the Canadian movie trailer, if it's like an American movie or whatever, okay? So again, do some pre-activities about that we mentioned before, what do you already know? And then again, compare the trailers, you know, how does the French version, how is it different or the same? I'm just saying French because that was me. How is it different or how is it the same? What's the target audience? Look at some movie trailers that are for specific French movies, and how are those types of trailers different than the type of trailers for American, or start comparing the types of films. What have you learned about the target culture from analyzing the trailers? How might you be more aware of marketing strategies that impact the movies you watch? Which movies would you want to see and why? So again, we're trying to get into those deeper reflection questions about, you know, just the understanding of it, but then the marketing strategies and how's the culture reflected and why do things change and how does it affect me and what makes me want to see a movie, et cetera. So we're really trying to build those skills. And again, this is literally just taken right from the standards. I literally just went to the standards, pulled out the examples we had in there and the skills we had in there, and just started throwing stuff out, plus things I've done before too. Lucas, we good?
Yep, no questions.
Okay, cool. All right, let's go into intermediate mid. Now let's switch to songs, which everybody loves to do songs. I'm a big fan of lyrics training. We talked about that the other day. Love lyrics trainings because you can get the video, you can get karaoke with subtitles, there's games, you can print the lyrics. The kids can look at the lyrics online. They don't even have to print them. You can set up a fill in the blank. Lyrics training is the best thing out there for songs ever. what's cool when you're picking a song is obviously, oops, I just made my thing like really big. I don't know how to get it back. There we go. Oops, hang on a second here. Okay, is find, if you can find an English and a French, or I keep saying French, a version of the song that exists in both English and French. Like there's a couple that I did in French. One of them was the song Little Boxes that, and I actually have this on lyrics training. I uploaded it. So French teachers out there, if you look for Little Boxes on lyrics training, mine's in there. Hopefully it's still there. But if you can get something that has an American and French version of the lyrics, because like on that Little Boxes one, the end of the lyrics completely change in the French version and it's totally different from the American version. And we had, and I used to do this with my level 3 kids, and we had this great discussion about how the difference in the lyrics represents the culture. The other one is like the song, and again, I only have French because that's my thing, is like the song Aux Champs-Élysées has the traditional version that we all know, but there's this rock version by NoFX that's also where you can talk about why, you know, why would they make a different version? How does the music change the meaning of it? How does the accent affect it, etc. So if you can get songs, any song is great, we all know that, but also if you can get songs that are in both languages, that's even better. Okay, so again, oops, I put what do you know about this movie? Sorry, that should say what do you know about this song? You can change that. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. That should say song, not movie. Okay, so again, what's the main theme or idea? How does the refrain summarize the message of the song? What's the overall feeling of the song? How does the music and lyrics contribute to this feeling? Why, how does it reflect the culture? Why did the artist write the song? Who is he targeting? Do you like the song? Why or why not? And then keep it, like I said, keep extending it. How likely are you to listen to the song on your own or to look for other songs by this artist? So again, we want to go beyond just what does it mean, but we want to dig into that culture. We want to dig into all the things that help you make meaning. It's not just the words. There's so much more that's involved in understanding something.
Kathy, a question to that addresses like sort of how to facilitate student understanding here.
Mm-hmm.
So there are kind of two parts. I realized now that I missed one earlier. So if we ask these questions in a live session, how do we proceed so that we can have all students' voice or have everyone's answer? So for example, if I use a chat box, they will see each other's answers. If they send me individual answers on a doc, they will create a big pile for me to go over for every question. So I think the question is, how do you facilitate getting into the nitty gritty and the concrete here? How do you facilitate good understanding on the part of the kids, but make sure that the students are understanding it on their own?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways you could do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with using the chat box, even if it looks like the kids are going to copy. As you can see on here, when everybody starts throwing stuff in the chat box, it starts moving so quickly. And granted, yes, there are kids who will hang back, but you know what? If they're going to learn from the chat box. So I don't see anything wrong with using the chat box. I would use the Padlet. I would use the Mentimeter. I would use, maybe you do it where one thing that the more and more I'm reading about, like with Catlin Tucker and the blended learning, is to do some of this where the students are collaborating on their own in small groups, and then they're reporting out to you. So this may be one where you put them into breakout rooms in Zoom. I don't know, I can't remember if Google Meet does breakout rooms or not, but if they're in Zoom and you put them into breakout rooms for 10 minutes and say, okay, you know, everybody has the link because you can share your screen in that. Everybody watch the song and do it within your breakout room where they're only in a group of 3 to 4, and then come back and report. I don't know if those, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, some of those ways. Other people feel free to jump into that. But I don't think there's anything wrong with those group responses. But I see what you mean, that you don't want some kids to never do it and everyone to have a voice. I personally like putting them in small groups and then having them come back and report out or collaborate outside of class. Because again, remember the interpretive, they can do a lot of this outside of class, and then they come and report in class as like the group leader. Does that help? At least some things off the top of my head.
I think
Maybe
so.
other
I'm
people
not
can.
seeing any other questions pop up related to that. There was a question regarding lyrics training, and I'll add a link here for that.
Okay. I don't get how to use page 11. If that's in the standards, Martha, we'll look at that one separately. Is that in the standards, Martha, the page 11? Yes. Okay, Martha, hang out at the end and we can talk about that. Okay. Okay. And the K6, yeah, we'll talk about that, Martha. Perfect. Okay, then the last one. So basically the point of this was to show, and it's sort of like what Kayla said earlier, just because I put the example as novice high or intermediate low, doesn't mean that you can't take the same thing and use that resource across every level. What I was trying to show was a couple different ways you could take a reading or you could take a video or et cetera, and use it across different levels for both listening and viewing if you're an ASL or reading. And again, with the remote piece, anything that if they can do it on their own outside of class, have them do it on their own outside of class. The last thing, the intermediate high and the advanced low, is there's the typical with the short stories is still, you know, you follow the Appendix D, you follow the standards, which are similar to some of the other things we did. The other thing I wanted to throw in here for you is, this is something I did with my French 4 and French 5 kids, is that we did book clubs when we were doing novels. And my friend Christy at Dublin, I don't know if she's on here or not, she had sent me what they did for book clubs, and I totally stole her idea and then just sort of tweaked it. So I have, French teachers, you're in luck because the whole thing was written in French. So when you click that link, it's in that same folder that I had shown you. The French version of the book club of everything to do is in there, but it really was, the kids were in groups who all picked like the same novel. So they had like 4 novels to choose from. And then they made book clubs of 4 to 5 people, you know, whatever you want, who all read the same book. And then they literally, and there's a template in there where they had to follow up, they had to make me a plan of, when is your book club going to meet every week? What are your discussion questions going to be? What's the relevant, you know, you have to pick the relevant vocab that's going to help you be able to discuss this book. And so they did their novels in small groups. And then what I did is, like, when they were like in a breakout room, or if I could call them together, obviously we were face to face, but I'm trying to think remote how we would do this, would be, you know, I'm going to give you during class today, 10 minutes I'm working with each book club. And I would go into their book club and I would talk with them about the book. I would talk about what do they understand. I would try and do some deeper probing questions if they had things about it that they didn't understand. Probably one of the most successful things I ever did in French 4 was, in French 5, were these book clubs. And again, because really after I set up the template and sort of how it was going to work, they were on their own and they did fantastic with it. So the version in there right now is the French version. I tried to stick it, like do the Google Translate, and it didn't translate the document. So I was a total Google Translate failure in English because I was trying to do it fast. So I'll retype it in English and post it as soon as I can. I just didn't have a chance. I didn't have a chance to get it in English. But this is a great one with those upper level kids. Put them in clubs or groups and make them do things collaboratively, because they're more likely, if they're in a group talking about the book together, they're much more likely to do it in a small group, especially a novel, than they are on their own. And this gets back to that question about how do I give every student a voice? This is a way to do it. If I put them in their own little clubs or their little groups, and I'm going to meet with each group for 10 minutes during this week. So that way you're not giving up the whole class, but you still are having time, you know, over the course of a couple of weeks to meet with them. That helps. Okay, the link for the versions available. Oh, you know what? It's in the folder. I think I might have changed the link. It's in the folder though, that initial link, Lucas, if you want to throw that in again.
Yep, yeah, I'll put it in there.
It's in there. If you go in there, you'll see a French one that says like literary or club littéraire. The English one's not in there yet, but I'll get it in there for you. The last thing I want to show you, it is 2:15. So if you're like, I got to go, I'm done, you're free to go. I'm just going to keep going a little bit farther and keep recording if you want to hang out for a little bit more. I wanted to show you just some sample lessons. I'm actually going to go into that folder myself. These are all lessons that I did either with my French students or that I've done with my ESL students. And so, and I'm going to look at this page here, and they're all in the folder. There's a thing on Disneyland Paris, and those of you who came to any of my live literacy ones, you know what I'm talking about with this, where there was a French and a Spanish version of a Disneyland Paris activity, and it gave interpretive tasks, but then it also moved to how do I launch an interpersonal and presentational tasks. And there's a teacher sort of type of thing, and then there's the student sample that's in French, okay? So that's like a full lesson where we took an authentic resource, we did tasks with it, and then we built interpersonal and presentational from it. There's an article, and the rest of these are ones I did with my ESL, but they'll give, when you look at them, they give you an idea of how it works, about when those electric scooters came about a year or two ago. They came to Columbus, and we talked a lot about, this was one where someone mentioned about the difference in the culture with the ELLs. The first question we talked about was, how do you get around? And so everybody had a different answer based on their culture. And one guy's like, we get around on camels, and we're all like, oh my God, that's so cool, or whatever. So this is where your ELLs can still talk about how they get around in their home country versus how they get around here. But again, it gave some interpretive reading with the article. There was actually a video and an article, so it was nice. It had the transcript and the video. And then we launched some tasks from that. There's about Alibaba and Singles Day in China. This came from the thing of Black Friday, because most of my students did not know what Black Friday was, you know, that day after Thanksgiving. And we talked about that. And then it turns out that in China, they have something that's called Singles Day. And I forget the date, if it was Valentine's Day, I forget when it was. And Alibaba is sort of the Amazon of China. And so there was this whole article about Alibaba and Singles Day. So this was a fantastic article for all of us to read. And my Chinese students were especially happy because they could totally relate to it. And they were sort of the experts on the Singles Day in Alibaba. This one about, we did a unit on childhood memories. And there's a song from the Kinks in there, which is obviously the American song. It was Come Dancing, which is all about the guy's childhood. And there were some McDonald's commercials that were about childhood friendships. So that you'll see there's a lot of activities with those. And then again, we launched interpersonal and presentational tasks from these. And these really turned into almost like an entire, I don't want to say a full unit, but if you're trying to do, if you remember the other day we talked about making micro units online instead of full units because everything takes longer, that these could literally be micro units when you go in and look at these. Throw in some, you know, vocab and related grammatical structures, and the culture piece is already embedded. These are nice ways to make micro units instead of making a whole huge, like 6 to 8 week unit that we normally do. We did a lot of songs with my students, so you can see what I did with the ESL, but it's similar to what I mentioned, like with the little boxes and the Aux Champs-Élysées in French. But we did Piano Man, where we did a lot of interpretive tasks about, they watched the video, they read the lyrics, we just did this on lyrics training, and then we talked about, you know, what's the mood, what's really happening, what are keywords. If you go in there, you can see it. And the same thing with the Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, because they had heard the song, but none of them knew what Shake It Off meant. And so we talked, it was a good one for idiomatic expressions because she has tons of idiomatic expressions in there. And so just another way that you can see how we took a song, and it wasn't just about what does the song mean, but we even had questions like, so when something happens to you, do you tend to shake it off or do you go and find revenge from someone? And Piano Man, we talked about like, where do you go when you want to just be with friends and feel good and escape from the world? So just some ideas when you go in there to take a look at about how, to me, interpretive is like the best and the most fun of all of them, because you can get so much culture in there. There's so much variety. It's a gift for remote learning because there's so much remote stuff. Kids can do so much remotely. But anyway, so that's just, I had a brainstorm, but we don't have time for it. So, but this is a good activity to do yourself, usually we do this if we have more time, is you just take a website, like, or take an authentic resource, like a grocery store, department store, or a school website, and you just do like this huge brain dump of what is all sorts of activities you could do with this resource. So I got my novices, I could do numbers, I could do weights, I could do, you know, quantities, I could do vocabulary words, I could do categories, I could do, you know, my intermediates could do, you know, organic versus non-organic. My advanced could start talking about hunger and different types of, you know, those little stores that are more independent run, etc. So this is a nice way, if you're like, I don't know what to do, just pick a resource that has a lot of stuff in it. And just, like I said, just start a brain dump across the mode or across the proficiency levels of some things that you could do. And it's amazing how our brains and world languages just like start shooting stuff out. Okay.
Kathy, just
yes.
a couple, if I can jump in, a couple of housekeeping things.
Yes.
Some people have asked about how to request contact hours for today's certificate. I added the link in here for the summer series, which has the recordings, and I know it has a link also where you can
yes.
Request. There was a question regarding accessing today's folder. Apparently some people are still having a hard time getting into today's folder. I don't know if this is
you have to make sure that you don't type the tiny URL in the Google search box. You have to type the tiny URL up in the address bar. So make sure you're doing that. If you still have trouble, shoot me an email and we'll see if we can figure it out. But make sure you're typing the tiny URL in the URL box at the top of the page. Don't put it in like the Google search box because it won't work.
And then one last question. I think timing wise went back to when we were talking about book clubs. A
yes.
teacher asks, what kind of books do you use?
Yeah, let me get in there and I will show you what I used with those kids. Now again, these were level 3. I tended to use a lot of short stories and shorter shorter novels. Short stories were great. Let me make this bigger. Oops, why is this so small? Oh, it's because my computer, I have my screen smaller. I tended to do a lot of short stories in level 3 and poetry. Level 4, like this one is Huis Clos, which is the No Exit. It's an existentialist novel, but it's a play. It's about, if you ever heard of Hell is Other People, that's where it comes from, is this novel. It's literally about 3 people who are stuck in hell together. So I don't know, it might be an appropriate one to use, French teachers this year. Le Mur is another great one. It's an existentialist. It's a very short, it's within a novel that had 4 stories within the novel, and this is the first one, a great one about the meaning of life, and very accessible to the kids. Le Petit Prince is always a favorite with French kids, and some French students are like, oh my gosh, I have no desire to read The Little Prince. Others are like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting my whole life to read it. So that's why I gave a lot of, I gave 3 choices. This was actually what I had available. I didn't have copies of anything else available right then. I had just transferred schools, so I didn't have a lot on that. But level 3, I had a lot of just short stories. Those Petit Nicolas stories were very popular with my French 3. A lot of poetry. You could do the same thing with, if you had the kids pick a series of songs. You could do it with a movie. You could do a movie club where the kids do the same type of thing with a movie. That would be a great way to do it too. So I would say, and I know some of you, if you're using I know there's the teacher novels out there, the teacher created novels out there. Again, this is a great thing to do with them. And then again, use it as a scaffold. Then, okay, we did it with this, we've done it with this. Now can I do it with like an authentic novel or something like that? Or plays are always nice because they're easier to read. Like we did Phantom of the Opera was another one that we had done. Hopefully that helps. L'Étranger, yeah, that's a good one. I mean, that's all I have for today. I know it was a lot of me talking and I feel bad, but hopefully, like I said, we'll get the, oops, my computer's gonna die. Hang on a second here. We'll get the recording up, but are there any other questions? And I know I had a question about the standards, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, I just saw one pop up. The person asks, have you got any easy readers / poems / songs to suggest for novice French learners and novice Spanish learners that highlight people and cultures of color?
There's a lot of great stuff out there from the Francophone African countries. I don't have any, I can't give you anything off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look through my stuff. But there's a lot of Francophone culture out there, especially from Africa, stories, poems, songs, traditions that I think would be a perfect one to tap into. Also, just within the diversity of the culture in Paris, especially right now, you're going to find graffiti is another great one for the lower levels. Graffiti is always a great one. For kids to look at, things like tweets, stuff like that. So I would think of, things that are short phrases like that and look, I would just Google it and just, African culture or whatever, Cameroon culture in Cameroon or songs, etc. That's what I would do. Someone just put some good ones in there. Perfect.
Yeah, good tips. I don't see any other questions right now though, Kathy, otherwise.
Okay, good. I mean, not good, but okay. So I will save the recording. I will save the chat box. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. I will save the chat box for you. I'll post the book club thing in English. Give me a day or two to have a chance to translate that into English. But other than that, then I appreciate you staying. I know it went a little bit later. And then tomorrow, like I said, we've got Beth and Carrie are going to do interpersonal and presentational. And I sort of had a sneak peek at their PowerPoint, and I think it's going to be really good tomorrow too. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording. And then